All right, chapter 19, legal descriptions and deeds. In this chapter, we're going to talk about the methods of describing real property legal descriptions. We're going to identify the 4 types of deeds used in New Jersey as well, and we're going to go over the anatomy of a deed. Okay, so we're going to learn about the 3 legal descriptions of land. And that's the first thing we're going to do, and then we'll get into the 4 types of deeds. So deeds will be the second half of this chapter. All right. So, what is a legal description? It's an exact way of describing real property in a contract, deed, mortgage, or other document that's acceptable in a court of law. And a legal description can be combined or altered by only a competent authority, like a surveyor or a title attorney. Now, deeds are the documents we use to transfer one's ownership of real estate. But a deed can also transfer your rights, title, or full or partial ownership interest in real property, and must include an adequate description of what exactly is being conveyed, such as the land description or partial ownership rights or mineral rights, air rights, etc., etc., etc. Now, there are 3 legal descriptions of land that we're going to go over, and they are metes and bounds, rectangular or government survey, sometimes also described as the public land survey system, but we just need to know rectangular or government survey for exams. It'll be one of those ways mentioned on exams. And a plat. A plat is a map of a subdivision. We learned about that in just the last chapter 18. It talked about subdivisions. That needs to be recorded in the county where the land is located. So let's highlight the legal description and the 3 legal descriptions.
Got it.
So legal descriptions should always include the name of the county and the state where the land is located. Benchmarks. A local permanent marker to aid surveyors in the measurements, which may be based on these local markers rather than an actual benchmark, which may be miles away. By the way, these terms benchmark, datum, and monument, I'm just bringing them up early. They're mentioned a little bit later in the chapter. However, we need to know them now for the descriptions. So I'm just giving you this up front on this slide. So what is a benchmark? It's a local permanent marker that aids surveyors in their measurements, which could be based on these local markers rather than an actual benchmark, which could be miles away. And a datum is a measurement of elevation. It's a point line or surface from which elevation is measured. According to the USGS, that's the United States Geological Survey, which is actually a department within the federal government. They monitor our planet, the USGS. They monitor, the ocean for tsunamis and things of that nature, or when we have meteors or anything like that that actually come and hit the earth. They monitor seismic activity for earthquakes and such, and shifting of the tectonic plates. They monitor the earth, basically. Usually on the news, when you see, unless the news station has their own satellite, the satellite imagery often has a logo on it, USGS. That's their satellites that they're using for the weather predictions. So the datum is a measurement of elevation, and the USGS defines zero elevation as the mean sea level at New York Harbor. That's the average. The mean is the average. Discounting any storm activity where you could get, higher sea levels than normal. So if you are measuring elevation locally, like wherever town you're located in New Jersey, is a surveyor going to New York Harbor to measure the elevation and then working his way back to your town so that he could tell you how many feet above sea level that particular property's at? No. But at some point in time, they did. And then they placed a local marker somewhere in your town that says, as of this point, this is so many feet above sea level. And now that surveyor can measure from that local marker back to the property. And those markers are all over the place. You may have even seen them or noticed them before, not even knowing what it was. Now, monuments. A monument is a marker at the corner, each of the corners of the property, to mark the boundaries. And this is usually done with a piece of wood, a piece of steel, iron, rebar, or a ribbon pinned to a tree. They're not going to bang a piece of wood or a piece of rebar into a tree. They'll just pin a ribbon to it if a tree happens to be at one of the corners of the property. So these are examples of surveyor benchmarks. Pieces of metal that are often dug into and glued to rocks or stuck in the ground. A lot of these are old. Look at this one here. This one, Station 77 in Stillwater, was originally placed in the Adirondacks there in 1882 and reset in 2016, 2018. Here's one from 1933. Shows you if you mess with this marker, it's a $250 fine or imprisonment for disturbing this mark. And then it tells you what your current elevation is above sea level. Surveyor marker could be a sign too, like this one. Here's a couple more markers. Here's one that's in a brick. Here's one that looks like it's by a dam. And here's one that was placed at a rock, or the rock was turned into one in 1890. Disney World got its own. Here's a marker. That's a marker. This is a survey mark. That's a survey mark. Or you could have these. Here's a group of surveyors and their toolkits that they used to have. They have these long poles, and now this one was a little bit more modern. They had a scope then, but prior to them having those scopes, they would just use a compass and a chain. A chain, a surveyor's chain, there's two types of surveyor chains. They come in 33-foot or 66-foot lengths. So when a surveyor is doing their paperwork and they're drawing a map and doing their measurements, they have to note, because they'll talk about how many chains of distance it was. So they have to note what type of chain are they using. And you see they got the handles at each end. So surveyors work in teams. There's got to be at least two people so they can stretch out the chain. So back when they were mapping out our country, that was a tough job, you know. People putting their life on the line, going out in the wilderness. You got all kinds of, mountain lions and bears and, you know, Indian tribes that they may shoot you with arrows and, all kinds of stuff just to do a measurement and layout of the land, That was their job. They're the explorers. So here's some units of measure we need to know. We need to know what an acre is. An acre is 43,560 square feet in an acre. Townships are consisting of 36 square miles, or 6 miles squared is another way of saying that. Now, when they say township, I don't mean like Edison Township or Woodbridge Township. Those are, when it's related to the name of the municipality, that's related to the form of government structure that they've chosen on how to manage the municipality when they call it a township. Here we're talking about township as a unit of measure, something totally different. Okay, so surveyors' townships are units of measure, which are 36 square miles. And there are 36 sections within each township. Each section is 1 square mile. And we can get into other kinds of measurements. We don't need to know chains for exams or hectares. Hectares are 100 meters by 100 meters, We're not on the metric system here. Hectares, a hectare is 2.47 acres of land. So legal descriptions of land, we went over benchmark, datum, and monuments already. And I'm going to keep building out on this. You're going to see with each version of this slide, I'm going to be adding an additional legal description of land here. So this first one, you don't need to snap a picture of. Snap a picture of the last one once we got all 3 legal descriptions. And then this would be a great study note for you, this slide. So metes and bounds is a measurement of distance and direction, meters and boundaries, measuring the meters and boundaries around the property. So a measure of distance and direction around the property's boundaries. It's only used in the 13 original states, of which New Jersey is one of. We were one of the 13 original colonies. We were actually the 3rd one. We were the 3rd state admitted to the Union. And these measurements around the property's boundaries all start and end at a definite designated points where they begin their measurement and they end their measurement when they close the loop around the property. That starting and ending point where they do their measurement is called a POB, short for a point of beginning. That's where the designated point at which the measurement begins and ends. So a measurement of distance and direction around the property lines, only used in the 13 original states. Now, it doesn't matter which direction, whether it's clockwise or counterclockwise. It's usually clockwise that they measure around the property, but it doesn't need to be. As long as the surveyor notes on their survey which direction they're going in as they're doing their measurements. And whatever direction they start, they need to continue in that until they close the loop and end up at that point of beginning where they started. Now, monuments are used to establish real estate boundaries, those surveyor stakes or ribbons. Here's a tip for you guys. The real estate agent should advise their client to shop around for surveyors. Otherwise, their attorney's just going to order a survey from whatever company they have a relationship with. And ask them, how much do they charge for the survey, but also how much do they charge to install the monuments? That's usually where they rip you off. Some of these surveyors charge as little as $50 per marker. Some of them charge well above that. I've seen them charge up to $450 per marker, which is just highway robbery. So ask how much they're charging to install the monuments at each of the corners of the property. And you should encourage the buyer to definitely get the survey. They're going to need to get a survey, but you should have that buyer purchase from the surveyor the markers at each of the corners of the property that they'll, as they're doing their measurements, that they'll uh, bang those stakes into the ground at each of the corners. And then usually what they'll do is they'll bang them in below the grass level line into the soil. And then if you ever need those markers, you could just pull them up and you can see where your property line is. But they should never be moved. And then this way you could tie a string around them and you could see where your property line boundary is. So if you ever want to put up a fence or build a shed or something, and it needs to be so far off the property line, you already got the markers there. You know, you could pull them up, put a string around them, and then just go so many feet off of that marker. Okay. So you don't need to get a survey each time. So this is a separate charge from the survey itself and can cost vary widely in costs, which can then which they can negotiate or shop before the survey is done. They'll need the markers if they wish to put up fences or sheds, etc., to see where the boundary lines are. There's no way for you to possibly know, even if the surveyor gives you their survey. It's basically a map, and it tells you where your property's boundaries are. But I could give you a survey, and the way you see the map and you see the way it reads off, I bet you can't find the corners of your property. So you got to pay that surveyor to bang those stakes in the ground at each of the corners. So let's highlight meets and bounds, the point of beginning, and what monuments are. Those are those markers that the surveyor puts to the ground at each of the corners of the property. Now, in the past, as they show you here, these days the surveyor will usually put a piece of wood or a ribbon or a piece of steel rebar, those reinforcement bars, in they'll pound them into the ground at each of the corners of the property. In the past, you could find surveys where the surveyor didn't have any markers like that. They just used natural boundaries, natural objects, which may not be there anymore, like the old oak tree or a giant boulder by the corner of this street and that street. If there were streets, even, they would reference natural objects, which over the years could have been moved by heavy construction material machinery to as they construct buildings and such, and build roads and things of that nature. See, here's a description of a survey that they give you here. A tract of land located in the township of Kingston, county of Burlington, state of New Jersey, may be described as follows. Beginning at the intersection of the east line of Jones Road and the south line of Skull Drive, fence east along south line of Skull Drive 200 feet, fence south 15 degrees east to 16.5 feet, more or less, to the center thread of Red Skull Creek, fenced northwesternly along the center line of said creek to its intersection. So good luck finding the boundaries of your property reading that. Okay, you have those highlights?
Yes.
Okay, here's a survey. I'm using my property as an example. This is a survey of my property, even though the survey is a little bit wrong. They marked an asphalt driveway here when it's actually a concrete driveway, but whatever. So, here's the house, got a wood deck in the back, concrete patio over here. I'm surprised that they've located this. There's actually some paver blocks there that were covered up by grass a little bit. But I got a paver block patio there, basement and concrete outline. It's pretty detailed how they put this in there. And here is, there's a curve in the road by my street. So look, they got a measurement of the arch, the radius, and the diameter of this curve. They have the lots that are neighboring mine. Look at that. I'm surrounded by 1, 2, 3, 4 different properties. Okay. Now this guy over here, where he put up his fence, he's actually got it. His fence is coming over onto my property line. The dark line is where my property line is, and the fence is right there. Since they tore down that fence and they built a new one, and as they were putting up that new fence, I seen when they took down the old one, I told them to get a survey and put the fence where it belongs because it was on my property. It was over 1.5 feet onto my property. Ooh. Not a big deal, but in city, yeah, it could be a big deal, So I had them put it where it actually belongs, and you could see they still got survey markers there in the ground. So I need to get this survey done because I got to tear down this wood shed that I built about 25 years ago because it kind of sunk into the ground. The shed is good still, but it's sunk into the ground, and you know what? I want a bigger one. So I'm going to tear that down, and I'm going to have to put up a bigger shed here, which I need permits for, but they also wanted a survey. And I found this old paperwork for this house that explains my section of town, my entire section of town that I live in. I live in the Sunnyside section of Linden. And my whole section of town at one point used to be a golf course. Yeah, it's not uncommon for developers to buy farmland and golf courses and then convert them into residential neighborhoods. And, so they made a subdivision out of it. It was called the Sunnyfield or Sunnyside. So look, here's the legal description, which is known as the designation of Lot 8, Block 199-106. That's not for my property. That's for the entire subdivision of my section of town here. On a map entitled Map of Sunnyfield Incorporated, Section 1, Linden, Union County, New Jersey, made by Davison Ross, professional engineers and land surveyors, on September 1949, and filed in the office of the Registrar of Union County on January 13, 1950. As a map number 335B. Okay. So the foregoing premises are further described in accordance with a certain survey made by WMC Sweeney Associates, dated November 18, 1978. Okay, so this survey was done back when my parents bought the house in 1978. So beginning at the point on the southwesternly side of Sunnyfield Drive, which points a distance of 312.06 feet along various courses and distances. Isn't it wacky how these surveyors are able to read this nonsense and word it in this manner and be able to know what the hell they're talking about? So this is a big description just telling you where the point of beginning is, where they're going to start their measurement from on my particular property. So they give this long distance here, long instructions talking about how down the block is where they begin their measurement to get to the point of beginning of my property. So along the said southwesterly line of Sunnyfield Drive in a general southwesterly direction, on a curve to the left, having a radius of, in an arc to a point, the point of beginning, fence south 55 degrees, 30 minutes, 0 seconds west for 123.52 feet to a point. Fence north 16 degrees. Basically what they're doing is they're doing a measurement all around the property. Okay. And then they tell you the lot and block number and the address. And then here it is on a tax map. This one over here. So block 335, lot 5. And then you got the measurements. All right, so this slide is not done yet. Don't take a screenshot of it yet. Remember, there's a third one coming still. So now the second legal description of land is known as the rectangular survey, also known as the government survey. It's used in Western states, not in New Jersey or any of the 13 original colonies. So we do not use this legal description of land here in New Jersey. It's used in Western states. It was established by Congress in 1785. It's a measurement that locates land using principal meridians and baselines measured by degrees of latitude and longitude to find areas of land called townships and sections. Okay, principal meridians and baselines. Remember the globes you had in your classrooms in school? I don't know if we still have them these days, but I don't know. When I grew up, they always had a globe in the classroom, right? Of the planet Earth. And then there was those invisible lines, those principal meridians and baselines that they had, right? Those are those invisible lines that, you know, sea captains and airplane pilots use to circumnavigate the world, the planet. So they're also used to measure out areas of land and to locate these areas of land called townships, which consist of 36 miles. Each township is numbered, and the location of it is can be found by degrees of latitude and longitude. And then within the township, there are 36 sections, each 1 square mile, or 640 acres. And they're all numbered. All right. So let's highlight this. Rectangular survey system, sometimes called government survey, was established by Congress in 1785 as early pioneers moved westward. The method of describing real property is not used in New Jersey or any of the other 13 original states because we use the meets and bounds system here. That's the older system that they used to use in Europe and other countries. All right. So here, page 355, we could also do this highlight here. A township contains 36 square miles and sections. A township is further divided into 36 numbered sections. Then I got an arrow pointing down here. Each section contains 1 square mile. So I also put a bracket around here showing that townships and sections are units of measure. And these townships are located, the rectangular survey system is based on sets of 2 intersecting lines called principal meridians and baselines, located by reference to degrees of latitude and longitude. And then from there, then they break it down. So you see here in this picture, this is a township. I know it's a township because it has 36 boxes, squares in there. Each one of those is called a section. And each one is how big? 1 square mile. Let's see. The township labeled 16 was always reserved for establishing a school. And 14 is for government use. Now, if you ever see a legal description of land, I read to you what the legal description of land looks like in a meets and bounds system. Starts at a point of beginning, and then they measure around the property, distance and direction. But if you ever see a legal description of land that reads like this is the government or rectangular survey, where it says that the SE stands for Southeast. The southeast quarter of the southeast quarter of the southeast quarter of section 1 would be a 10-acre square. What? Okay, let's just say we zoom in on one of these sections here. All right, so let's zoom in on any one of these sections. And now it looks like this. The SE quarter of the SE quarter of the SE quarter is 10 acres in size. So how do they come up with that? Well, just look at this outer box, the outer perimeter, and draw a cross right through it, a line straight down the center here, straight down, straight across the center here. And now you just put it into 4 big quarters, right? So this is the southeast quarter. And now if you were to put that in a line going across that, and you break it into, slice it into 4 more sections, this is the southeast quarter of the southeast quarter. And now if you break that into 4 quarters, this would be the southeast quarter of the southeast quarter of the southeast quarter, which is 10 acres in size. Okay. Not that you need to know how to read this, but for exam, you do need to recognize that when the legal description of land is reads like the SE quarter of the SE quarter of the SE quarter is 10 acres in size, know that that is the government or rectangular system. Good?
Yes.
So here we go. We got the planet, the globe that we had in the classrooms, you know, the principal meridian, the prime meridian, and then you got the equator. And there's a lot of lines in between that are invisible. That are measured by degrees of latitude and longitude all the way around the planet. And you could use them to locate specific locations. And so if you find a township that way, and then you could zoom in onto one of their numbered sections, and then you could break it down further to find a local plot of land. Now you could snap a picture of this. This would be the final one, which now we also add a plat map. A plat is a map of a subdivision indicating the location and boundaries of an individual property. The map is recorded in the county where the land is located. Okay, each lot location is designated by lot and block number within the map, and often combined with meets and bounds description to measure the property. Yes, you can combine legal descriptions. So the meets and bounds and the plat map. Well, yeah, the plat map just shows the map of the subdivision and all the blocks and lots. And then you can measure the lot using the meets and bounds system, measure the distance and direction around the property. All right, so what kind of questions will you get on exam? Well, you need to know what a benchmark, a datum, and a monument is. Those are there at the top of this slide. This is all the notes that you need for this first half of chapter 19, is what you see on this slide. And meets and bounds. Let's see. A legal description of land only used in the 13 original colonies or the 13 original states that has a definite or that has a point of beginning where the legal description commences and ends. Meets and bounds. What do you call the designated point at which measurements begin and end in the meets and bounds survey system? The point of beginning. A legal description of land used in Western states, either rectangular or government survey. A legal description of land created by Congress in 1785, rectangular or government survey. A legal description of land that locates areas using degrees of latitude and longitude and principal meridians and baselines. The rectangular or government survey. A legal description of land that locates areas known as of land measured in 36 square miles called townships, and with sections, 36 sections, each with 1 square mile. The rectangular or government survey. A map of a subdivision that's recorded in a county where the land is located. A plat map. You see different ways they could ask questions about these things? And they will. What is a measurement of elevation? The datum. The datum's important. It turns the map into 3 dimensions now. Because now you're just not measuring the flat map. You're now turning it sideways and measuring in 3 dimensions, 3D, because you're measuring elevation now too. This could be important to find out if a property's in a flood zone. On a flat map, it may look like it's in a flood zone because it's got a river running right next to the house. But if you were to turn the map in 3 dimensions, you could actually see the map. The house is actually on top of a mountain, and the river is in a gully way below. So it's not really in a flood zone. Or it could be used for giving legal descriptions of condominiums, where you could have a 3-story building with 3 condominium units located at the exact geographic location. However, if you turn the map sideways and start measuring elevation, they begin and end at different elevations. 1st floor, 2nd floor, 3rd floor unit, for example. But they do a measurement of the elevation. All right. So a plat is a map of a subdivision to locate individual properties by lot and block number and combines the meets and bounds measurement of each individual property. Every municipality consists of many subdivisions that were built over the years, and as the municipality is being built and developed. The tax maps are basically all the subdivision maps, which are then linked together. They even have numbers on them that show you that you could assemble them. This is this map, and then that matches up, put map number 25 here. So then you put it together, kind of like a puzzle. A description of land designated by lot and block number in order to locate on the map. A plat and map of a subdivision. The land is divided into block and lot numbers and indicates the streets, access roads, public uses, rights of way, etc. And subdivision plats for condominium descriptions. Each unit references elevation on the floors and ceilings above the city datum. Here's one plat map showing you, here's one subdivision here, another subdivision here, another subdivision here, another one here, and another here. All in one plat map. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 subdivisions. You could also see some other plat maps on page 343, 356, and 371. This one is on page 356. So highlight plat of a subdivision, and then right next to that, a map of a subdivision. A plat of a subdivision is filed with the clerk in the county where the land is located. Right? So here's a sample of a small plat map. This guy's got this one property over here. It lays out the streets, how wide the street is. It's got that big area where you could turn around called a cul-de-sac. Each lot number is numbered and got the measurements around it. You see a notation of public utility easements. So you can see a little better there. We put the dark lines over it. And this street, it's built on your property, so you could name it. And when you're submitting these plans for this development to get approved by the city's planning board, you got to write on there whether in your application, whether the street, in this case, it's only one street, that you could name it. And you could dedicate it or keep it private. You have to note whether it's going to be private or you're dedicating it. What is dedication? When you give land to the government for a public use like streets, schools, and parks. Once again, here's a tax map, City of Linden. Well, this isn't the whole city, but you see how it has a number here, 25 up in the corner. Here, there's another sheet 24, sheet 30, and sheet 26 here, and sheet 22 here. So you could take different maps. Each one of these maps are numbered. You could take the different maps and line them up and build them up all around it. And now you start building out to the whole neighborhood, to the whole city.
Question, if you're, I guess, a developer and you build a private street and you don't dedicate it, do you have to maintain it when it snows? And
yes, because it's your street, it's a private road that you built on your land.
That makes sense. Okay.
If you're not dedicating it to the city, then that means that you're keeping ownership of that land that you built a street on. Now you're selling all these houses on this street. You're building houses over here on each one of these lots and selling them. Somebody needs to maintain the streets and keep it clear of snow and then repair them when they start getting torn up, right? So it's on your land, so you got to do it. But if you're going to be building up and selling all the land with houses on it, why would you want to keep the street?
Yeah, I would think most people dedicate it. They give it back to the government, right?
Absolutely. They dedicate it. Correct. Because no need for you to keep that. That's an expense and a liability.
Yeah.
But you can name it. All right. Now, a licensed surveyor prepares a survey, shows the location, dimensions of a parcel of a land, and shows the location, size, shape of the buildings on the lot. I showed you previously the survey for my property. And when are surveys used? Well, when we convey a portion of the lot, when you place a mortgage, when you're determining the legal descriptions, when you're subdividing land, or for construction. I told you I want to build a shed, a new, bigger shed on my land. I need to get a survey. See here, and this is that survey of the back of my lot where my current wood shed is. And the neighbor's wood fence comes on my property about 1.5 feet over here. Now on this side, you can't see it in this image, but on this side, closer to the house, I also got a fence that comes inland onto my property. But that's our fence. We put that up years ago. And why is it inland? Well, is it because we didn't know where the property line was? No, it's actually because there's trees there. So instead of tearing down the trees to put up a fence, we put the fence inland a little bit into our property instead of on the neighbor's property.
Those are your trees now, right? So you have to take care of them?
No, those trees are on the neighbor's property. Well, actually, they're on both of our property because the trees are like right on the property line.
But if the trees were say the trees were on your property and then you put the fence up, but you didn't want to take the trees down, so you put the fence closer to you. Are those trees going to be considered yours still, or is that like an easement or whatever it's called? Because now they are taken over. They're on the other person's property for a certain amount of time.
Oh, hold on a second. The location of the fence doesn't determine the boundaries of the land.
So they're still yours, even though the person might think they're theirs because they're on the other side of the fence?
They're both of ours because the fence has nothing to do with the property line. The fence is inland. You know, the trees are actually right on the property line. Actually, the trees are more on the neighbor's property than they are on mine, but they're partially on mine, right where the property line runs. So we couldn't put a fence up right there unless you put up the fence and stop and put a post right next to the fence, you know, and build it out that. But that doesn't make sense because now you're building up a bunch of gaps in the fence. So we built the fence in a little bit past the tree. Here you can see the survey marker of that recent survey that I had done. Oh, in the winter, this is close to the winter time where the grass turns color here. I put up new seed to actually keep it green longer now. But why did the surveyor put the marker all the way over here and not all the way here by the curb? You know, the first 6 feet into your property, the city and the utility companies have an easement right to it. Look where the telephone pole is. That reminds me, I got to call the PSE&G because they're supposed to move the telephone pole over here. Because it's in the way of my driveway. And I got to have, this is a water drainage pipe for them. I got to put a water drainage pipe that comes out here. So they either got to put a tree here or they got to put the telephone pole here or over here. And they're going to put up those much bigger ones that they put up now. This one's kind of old. But that's why they put those survey markers. If you notice they put them much further inland. This tree's not here anymore. That one came down with the last storm. 2 storms ago. Now, there was already a piece of rebar from a previous surveyor that was done, the original that Sweeney surveyor. There's actually one there, but I didn't have a metal detector. The surveyor did, and he found it. He did his measurements and got his metal detector out and found that there was actually already a steel rebar there under the ground. And he actually dug it out and he pulled the grass over a little bit, like a little flap, and you could see the piece of rebar underneath the grass level. So he just put this wooden stakes up where where those pieces of rebar are.
To determine which towns have sidewalks? Because obviously you do not.
I do not hear, but some sections of town do. It's
How do
different
they
sections.
determine?
It's the same town. Different sections have sidewalks. Some don't. You know, if they wanted to, well, first of all, to do that, they'd have to tear down all these trees. They'd have to pull down all the trees on the block. And this town is known for its trees. We actually have it as part of the city logo. Is the famous big old oak trees. You know. See the survey marks. All right, now, once again, here is that subdivision map, and you could take the other map that's on sheet number 24 and match it up right here. This map is sheet 25. So you could match up to sheet 24 right here. You put sheet 22 here, 26 and 30 here, and then you could build out that map. And down here, 32. And these maps will always have a weather vane here. It's kind of like a weather vane. It shows you which direction north is. So north is pointing in this direction towards the northeast here. So if my property's right here and this is northeast, my house is facing east. That's good. Do you know some people won't buy a house if it's not facing east? You got to be aware of that if you're in areas that have uh, populations of people that follow Feng Shui or Vastu, which is a lot of the Indian culture. Um, it'll save you a lot of time to know this. I've had I had a couple that was buying a new house. And when I was out showing the properties, I was only showing them really to the husband, and he was coming out with his friends. And we kept showing, I showed him so many houses. And then on one of them, I'm coming out, putting the key back in the lockbox. And I'm looking over at the guy, and he's huddled up with his friends like this around a cell phone. I said, "What are you guys doing?" And they're like, "Oh, we're looking at the Compass app on the cell phone." Compass app? Yeah. There's a Compass app you could get for your cell phone. Oh, why? Oh, you just want to see which direction the front door faces. Why? Well, because if it's not facing east, we can only buy the house if it's facing east or maybe northeast, but we don't want it if it's south or west. You think you could have told me that before? Could have saved me showing you so many homes. I could have pulled them up before I ever set an appointment to show you a single house. I could look it up on a map and see what direction the front door faces and not show it to you if it's facing the wrong direction. But that's because in some cultures in Indian culture they follow Vastu. Not all Indians do. It's only I mean I told this to an Indian lady one time who I had a listing for, and she was like, "That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard." And I was like, "No, it's a thing amongst a lot of Indians." She's like, "I never heard that before. That's so stupid. I'm Indian." And I was like, "Listen, I'm going to have an open house on Sunday. I want you to come by shortly before the end of the house. I guarantee you I'll be showing the house to somebody because I'm getting a lot of traffic at these open houses. But your front door's not facing east. And that is what most of them are looking for." even though your unit is priced right, it's priced actually very good. And you've got a corner unit, you got a 2-car garage instead of a 1-car garage. You got the full basement and it's finished. And your unit is bigger than most of the others, and you got it priced really good. And she's wondering, why is nobody making an offer on it? This was a townhouse. And I was like, just come by during the open house. You'll see. You'll see. So she comes by and she walks in. I see her walk in, and I'm showing it to a newly married couple, Indian couple. And we're wrapping up the showing, and now they're starting to ask questions about like the school system and this and that and the other thing. And I'm talking to her, and then she starts to chime in a little bit about it. And they're having a good conversation. We're all having a good conversation about it. And now they're interested in putting an offer in. But unfortunately, they already had their own agent, because I was talking about, I could put this offer together for you. They're like, oh, we have an agent. We'll have them put it together. I was like, okay. And they start stepping out the door, walking out the door. Wife walks out, husband's walking out, and then he turns around and says, oh, by the way, which direction does the front door face? Her eyes like lit up, and she's like, what does it matter which direction the front door faces? Like, so she flipped out, and I told her, I was like, I told you, I was like, it's important to all these people, they're at least the ones that follow Vastu. It's like their guru, their spiritual guru, their guide, told them that, hey, for a strong future or wealth and prosperity, the front door needs to face east, So most Indians will not buy a house if it's not facing east, you know. And she's like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I was like, well, it doesn't matter if it's dumb to you or not. They believe it, and that's important to them, So it is what it is. We gotta deal with that. I'm telling you, I've shown your house to so many people like this. It's frustrating, isn't it? I was like, so don't take it out on me. I was like, it is what it is. You can't do nothing about it, but you got to be aware of what's important to different people and of different cultures. But it could also be Chinese people or Asians, or not even necessarily. These days, it could be anybody that follows Feng Shui, right? Feng Shui principles, and they have the same principles similar to Vastu about which direction the front door faces. But in Chinese culture, where that came from, that was due to um, uh, where sites for graves and house design based on so to determine sites for graves, they use that principle, and also for house design, because the master bedroom was normally in the back side of the house, not the front side of the house. Do you want the when you wake up in the morning, do you want the sun shining in your face, or those are how those principles work, basically. All right, so datum is that measurement of elevation, and 0 sea level is at New York Harbor, and they use that measurement all around the country. Benchmarks are those permanent local reference points that aid surveyors in their measurements. So we could highlight them now in the book. Even though we had them on that one slide I told you to snap a picture of to study from. All right, and then I'll pause the recording and we'll break for lunch. All right, so let's see. We finished off here. We left off with highlighting this. You guys got these highlights from about the datum and the benchmark? Page 357.
Yeah, 1 second. I want to do this show. Okay.
All right. And if you did not yet, here's another shot at getting a snapshot of this slide, which talks about what a benchmark, datum, monuments, meets and bounds, POB, rectangular survey, township sections, and plat mappings, which is a lot of things that you need to know. And it comes from this chapter. So this is another important chapter that has a lot of terminology in it. Plus, it also talks about deeds, because right after this, we're going to start talking about deeds. And I believe we are pretty much done with legal descriptions now.
Okay, I got it.
All right, so deeds, there we go. I was right. Look at that. So what is a deed? A deed is a written instrument where an owner of real estate intentionally conveys their rights, like air rights or mineral rights, etc. Their title means ownership, or interest, could be a partial ownership interest in a parcel of real estate. All of that gets transferred by some sort of deed to convey that ownership of those things. So the parties in a deed are the grantor, that's the seller, and the grantee, that's the one who's receiving the property. So the grantor has to sign a deed for it to be valid. The signature of the grantee, the buyer, is not required for a deed to be valid, because deeds, the ownership transfers upon delivery and acceptance of the deed. So deeds don't need to be dated by or signed by the buyer in order for them to be valid. However, before a buyer can record their deed in the public records, they need to sign it and their signatures need to be acknowledged. Okay. An acknowledgement is just basically a notary, judge, attorney, or an elected politician confirming that they know who you are, or they check your identification before you sign a document to ensure that those signatures are genuine, to prevent forgeries. So deeds have to be signed and dated, and the signatures acknowledged by all parties. Okay, so there we go. And deeds are valid even if not recorded in the public records. However, if you don't record it in a public record and somebody wants to search the public records for the history of this property, there's going to be a break or a gap in the chain of title. What is a chain of title? Well, there's many links in a chain. Think of each owner of real estate as a link in the chain. So all the documents pertaining to them in the public record is one link in the chain. And if you could link one owner to the next, just by searching the public records of ownership of that piece of property, that's called chain of title. And if you can't because somebody didn't record their ownership in the public records, that's known as a break or a gap in the chain of title. So we need to fix that in order to do our research to make sure that the person who's buying the property has got good, clear title and there's been no nefarious things going on. Okay, so there are 4 types of deeds in New Jersey, and they are the full covenant and warranty deed, a bargain and sale deed with covenants against Grantors Act, a bargain and sale deed without covenants. Covenants are legal promises, and a quitclaim deed. So that's from those that offer the most protection to the buyer to those that offer the least. So a deed is that written document, that written instrument, which an owner of real estate intentionally conveys their right, title, or interest in a parcel of real property. And according to the statute of frauds, all deeds must be in writing. And the owner who sells or gives the land is the grantor, who grants their ownership to somebody who buys it or they give it to. So deeds must be signed by the seller, the grantor. And they need to name the buyer in the deed so that they can be readily identifiable as to who took the ownership. But deeds don't need to be signed by the buyer, the grantee, until such time that they choose to record it in the public records. Get those highlights down, right lease protection, most protection like that. And we're going to go over the anatomy of a deed and the different types of deeds.
I'm good.
Jasmine, you good too?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is a little bit neater than what you see written in the book. And I also have written the different names that some of these deeds go by. A warranty deed is also known as a general warranty deed or a full covenant and warranty deed. That's the type of deed that offers the most protection of any deeds. The bargain and sale, CAG, that stands for Covenants Against Grantors Act. It could also be known as CVG, Covenants versus Grantors. What's the difference? There isn't any. It's like, have you ever seen court documents where it's this person against that person? Or sometimes it says instead of against, it says versus. That's the only thing. But it's also known as a special warranty or limited warranty deed. This is the most common deed used here in New Jersey. The bargain and sale CAG. Well, we're going to go over what each deed does. They're all used to transfer one's right, title, or interest in real property. But we got a full warranty deed. We're going to go over what all these guarantees or warranties are that are being given in a full warranty deed that make it offer so much protections. And then we're going to go over a bargain and sale CAG type deed. Bargain and sale CAG type deed is where the owner of the property says, I've done nothing to encumber this property as long as it's been in my possession, as long as I've owned it. But I'm not guaranteeing you that the time that anybody owned it before me. So I'm saying that as long as I've owned it, I've not encumbered the property in any way with any additional restrictions on it or any liens, or there's been no improper transfers of ownership. A bargain and sale type deed, notice, doesn't have a CAG after it. This is a totally different type of deed. They look very similar, so don't get lazy when you mean to say bargain and sale covenants against grantors, the CAG. Don't just call it a bargain and sale, because that's a totally different type of deed. A bargain and sale type deed doesn't have any covenants. See, in a bargain and sale CAG deed, the seller's saying, I'm guaranteeing you as long as I've owned it, I've done nothing to encumber it. But a straight bargain and sale deed isn't saying that. A straight bargain and sale deed is saying, we have the legal right to sell the property. That's all we're saying. We're not guaranteeing the quality of the title. This is also known as a straight bargain and sale deed. And it's sometimes used in auctions and sheriff sales or during tax auctions or sheriff's auctions. And then we have the quitclaim deed. Quitclaim deed, you're not even claiming that you have any ownership or interest in the property. By signing a quitclaim deed, you're just saying I'm giving up any interest that you think I may have in it. It's not even saying that you have interest. However, a quitclaim deed can just as effectively transfer the ownership of real estate as a full warranty deed, if the person that's signing it has good ownership at the time they sign it. So let's go over this warranty deed, also known as a general warranty or full covenant and warranty deed, provides the greatest protection of any deeds. So with it, they're giving the covenant of season, the covenant against encumbrances, quiet enjoyment, assurance, and warranty forever. And the covenants in a warranty deed, they're not limited to matters that occurred during the time the grantor owned the property. They extend back to all previous owners throughout history since we started keeping records of ownership of land since before we even formed as the United States. I don't want to hear about, well, then there should be records there about the Indian ownership, right? No, because that before the United States, before we took over this territory, before we conquered it. Yeah, we conquered this land. It is ours now. All right. So stop the nonsense with the you're 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 on someone else's land, someone else's territory. Oh no, it ain't theirs no more. Just like every other tiny piece of land on the planet Earth, it's been conquered by someone. And those people that make up those arguments are usually morons. Because what about your argument? Let's play devil's advocate. Let's say side with you. Yeah, we're sitting on Indian land, stolen land. Okay, well, what tribe did we steal it from, and who did they steal it from? Because Indians fought against other Indians and they conquered lands. They weren't just like the most peaceful people in the world and they all got along in harmony in nature. That's not how it works. Okay, so Indians fought Indians and they conquered each other's land. Then we came in and we conquered it. It's like how in Europe, if you look at how over the centuries the Mongols had everything, and then you had the Romans came in, they took over everything, they were conquering the world. Land ownership has been changed as wars have been fought and people have conquered different areas and claimed the land. Look at the country where my ancestors come from in Poland. Okay. Poland used to be a huge nation. It used to cover from top to bottom, from ocean, from water to waterfront, across slicing right across Europe. But over the centuries, it's grown, it's shrunk. It's kind of small. All right. But if you look at the maps, you could look this up over the years, how it's changed. All right. So let's go over this. What are those guarantees in a full warranty deed? So we have the covenant of season, where the grantor warrants that they're the owner of the property and they have the right to convey the title to it. We have the covenant against encumbrances. These are all the warranties that are made in that full warranty deed. The grantor warrants that the property is free from any liens or encumbrances and will defend the property against any claims that there's liens or encumbrances on it. An encumbrance is a claim by another or a liability against real estate, such as taxes, judgments, liens, restrictive covenants, easements, licenses, that may diminish the use of or the value of the property, which the grantee, the buyer, was not made aware of. Can you buy a property that's encumbered by something? Sure you can. But you don't want to get any surprises. So when you agree to buy a property, you should be getting it with whatever encumbrances that the seller told you in advance. If there's any surprises there, well, that's not good. Now we need to address that. And the covenant of quiet enjoyment. That's a guarantee the title's good against third parties that may make claims against it, and they're willing to defend it in court if anyone claims rights or ownership of the property. The covenant of further assurance. The grantor further promises to obtain any documents or instruments needed to make the title good, to produce evidence in court, to fight against any claims against it. And the covenant of warranty forever states if promises in the warranty ever fail, the grantor will reimburse the grantee for any loss sustained. So if anybody should ever step forward to be able to prove that there was an improper transfer of the ownership of this land anytime throughout history, that they'll try to defend it, They'll try to produce documents to prove it in court. But if it fails and they successfully win the claim, that you got to turn the property over to them now. Where does that leave you? You bought the property, you got a loan, you got a mortgage loan, you've been paying it off, partially paid off, and now you still got a loan. Well, the person who gave you that full warranty deed says that they'll reimburse you for any loss sustained. Okay, those are lofty promises. That's a lot of promises there. So it offers the most promises of any deed. But what if the person's broke now? How are they going to hold up their promises? Well, I really, really meant to want to pay you back in case there was ever a failing, but hey, it failed and I'm broke, so I can't pay you back, you know? So it's one thing to have those promises. It's another thing for them to, in reality, how they'll actually work, you know? So it is the type of deed that offers the most guarantees and promises of any deed. And it's crazy that these covenants are not limited to the matters that occurred during the time the grantor owned the property, but they extend back to all previous owners throughout history. That's crazy. That's a lofty promise to be making. Now, the bargain and sale CAG type deed, this one's more realistic. In this type of deed, this is why this is the most common deed that's used here in New Jersey. The bargain and sale covenants against grantors, or for short, CAG, or covenants versus grantors, CVG. The grantor, the seller, is willing to warrant or guarantee that they have done nothing to encumber the property while it was in their possession, while they owned it. It makes no guarantees of previous owners haven't encumbered the property in some way. The current owner states that they've done nothing to encumber the property while it was in their possession and their possession only. You know, but usually when people buy a property, they do a title search that tries to search back to make sure that previous owners didn't encumber the property. And then the current owner just says, hey, I'm guaranteeing you the quality while I owned it, but not from previous owners. Okay. So that's why this is referred to sometimes as a special or limited warranty type deed. And this is the most common type deed used in New Jersey. Plus, people buy title insurance that will insure them against claims from any previous owners that ever owned it throughout history. Okay, so if this type of deed should fail, you know, if you're guaranteeing that as long as I own the property, I've done nothing to encumber it. And if that's true, then that's good. But if someone steps forward that previously owned it and makes a claim and they're successful in winning it, where does that leave you? Well, that's what title insurance is. A title insurance company will have somebody who will search the public records and look for any liens or encumbrances or any improper transfers in the past. And when they're sure and they're certain that you got good, clear title, they'll issue you title insurance policy. Now, if that should ever fail and it turns out that liens pop up or their previous owner makes a claim that there was an improper transfer of the ownership, and you may have to give up the property. Well, title insurance, there's two title insurance policies that you get. For one is one is the buyer's policy, one is the lender's policy. So the buyer's policy will reimburse the owner of the property for any money they laid out paying for that purchase up until now. And the lender's policy will pay off any balance that's outstanding on your mortgage loan. So that's what title insurance does. Okay, so let's do the highlights here for bargain and sale type deed. Page 361. And then you're seeing sample deeds in the book here. Warranty deed, a sample bargain and sale deed. Because you have a blank deed and you fill it out, it doesn't mean that it's valid. Who says you have the right to sell the property? I mean, I could fill out a deed for your property. I could take one of these deeds and fill it out for your property. Does that mean I have the legal right to sell it? No, because I never had any interest in your property to begin with. So you see how a deed is not proof of ownership or evidence of title? Let's first go over the different types of deeds before we get into that conversation. Okay, y'all have these highlights?
Yes.
So we have the straight bargain and sale deed. This is one where there are no covenants, there are no promises being made as to the quality of the title. By signing a bargain and sale deed, the seller is only saying they have the right to convey the ownership to it. There's no express warranties to the quality. So the grantee, the buyer, has little recourse if defects later appear. So caveat emptor is how you pronounce that. You could add that to your definition list, a little more Latin. It's not pronounced caveat emptor. It's caveat emptor. It means let the buyer beware. Do your own due diligence. Get a title search before you buy that property. Now, this type of deed is often used in sheriff sales, foreclosures, and tax sales. Hey, at those auctions, they're saying they're not guaranteeing the quality title. They're just saying we have the legal right to sell it. All right, now the last one, the quitclaim deed, provides the least protection of any deed. It carries no covenants or warranties. It doesn't even imply the person signing it has the rights to sell the property or any interest or rights in the property. Only that they're giving up any rights or claims of interest. Kind of like the gold miner, he'd be mining the mine, and then he gets frustrated, can't find no more gold. He says, I'm quitting this claim. Okay, he's just giving up his interest in the property. However, you could just as effectively transfer the ownership by giving up your interest if you have good full ownership interest in the property at the time you sign it. But it doesn't even make that claim. Okay. So a quitclaim deed can transfer ownership just as effectively as a full warranty deed can, if the grantor has the good title when they sell it. Now, it's often used with simple transfers within a family, transferring property during divorce settlements, or it can be used to clear up clouds on a title, like a break or gap in the chain of title. Okay. We're good?
Yes, good.
All right. So now we'll go over the anatomy of a deed. So the grantor, that's the seller. They should have legal capacity, just like with any contract, to sign. You got to be sound mind, legal age. The grantee is the buyer. They have to be named with reasonable certainty so they can be readily identified, and they need to be named in the deed. You have to spell out the consideration, what the full purchase price was, what the parties gave in the exchange. Remember, there's three different types of consideration. Anybody remember what they are? I'll start you off. Legal tender. That's like cash or a mortgage loan. An exchange of something of value, like bartering. Or love and affection. It could be a gift, but then it needs to be accompanied by a letter stating that, in fact, it's a gift. Now, the granting clause is the heart of the deed. It explains what exactly is being sold or transferred. And the granting clause is always followed by the habendum clause. The habendum clause is anytime something needs further explanation that's in the granting clause, it will be spelled out in the habendum clause. The habendum clause always begins with the words to have and to hold. And then it'll be followed by, like, say there's two people that bought a property together. They're not married, but they have ownership interest. And maybe one put up 75% of the cash, so they'll be 75% owner. The other's 25%. Unless you specify in the deed that you're 50-50 when there's only two owners. So where would you specify that? You'd specify it right there in a habendum clause. All right. And then we have a legal description of the real estate. It has to be in the deed. What are the three legal descriptions of land? Meets and bounds, government or rectangular survey, or a plat map. Not the address of the property or the lot and block number. They can be very useful in explaining what's being sold there and what's being transferred. However, you need a legal description of the real estate because, look, did you know that your post office can change your address on your house? They don't need to ask you. They could change the address of your house. I've seen it happen before. I've seen that on one of my listings one time in Elizabeth. They shifted the addresses all the way down the block for some reason. You know, no rhyme or reason to it. They just shifted. They changed everybody's address on the block. Could you imagine? Now you got to go change your driver's license and your all the billing and stuff like that for all kinds of stuff gets all screwed up now. So deeds do not have to be dated in order to be valid. They don't need to be signed by a buyer either, unless they try to record it in a public record. And then everyone's signature is required, and they must be acknowledged in order to be recorded, you know, to prove that the signatures are genuine. It's not a forgery. So I guess we could just highlight here, deeds do not need to be dated in order to be valid or signed by the buyer unless they want to record it. I think in some of these instances, just studying my notes are a little better. I actually got a slide coming up that's even better than both of those. But I'll let you write your notes there. You can do the highlight.
Got it.
Okay. There we go. You may want to snap a picture of this slide before we even get started. This is everything you need to know about deeds for exam, all on one slide. So you got two slides that I gave you. It's everything you need to study from chapter 19. Got it?
Yes.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I'm not moving the mouse over the screen while anybody's snapping a picture or taking a screenshot or anything. All right, so the grantor, once again, just a recap for the requirements to convey a property. You got to have the seller has to be 18 years of age or older to effectively convey, or the contract may be voidable. Now, is there ever a time where a contract with a minor can be valid? For exam purposes only? If they're married. Remember, if they're a married minor, even though technically minors can't be married in New Jersey anymore, it's still a law in the books that says, you know, if they're a married minor, they could effectively transfer the ownership. They could sign legal documents and such. So when is a contract with a minor considered a competent party and an adult? If they're married. All right, so you have to be of legal age otherwise to sign a deed. Sound mind, legal age. The grantee, the buyer, has to be named so that they can be identified. You have to have consideration To be valid, deeds must contain a clause acknowledging receipt of something as consideration, an exchange of something of value between the parties, like legal tender, money or a mortgage loan, fair exchange of goods or services, and love and affection. A consideration of $1 or love and affection must be accompanied by an affidavit, which is a sworn statement explaining the transaction is, for example, a gift. Okay, so we got a couple words with A that we need to learn about. An affidavit, we need to know that. What is an affidavit? It's a sworn statement. Then down here at the bottom, an acknowledgement. Basically provides evidence the signatures are genuine because maybe they checked your ID or they know who you are. A granting clause is the heart of the deed, explaining the type of the deed, what is being transferred, title, rights, or interest, and how new owners are taking ownership, like the type of tenancy, if it's tenancy in severalty, tenants in common, joint tenancy, or by the entirety. And the habendum clause follows the granting clause, begins with the words to have and to hold. I like to mispronounce the word habendum, the have been to hold clause. To remember that, which clause in the deed begins with the words to have and to hold? The have been to hold clause is the habendum clause, right? So its provisions must match with those in the granting clause and specifies things stated in the granting clause that require further clarification, like the percentage of ownership if there's several owners that don't have equal ownership shares. Or maybe you're going to name a remainder man if it's a life estate. Where would you name them? In the habendum clause. So anytime something needs further clarification, that's done in the habendum clause, the have been to hold clause. Okay, and then you have to have a description of the real estate, one of the legal descriptions of land, which they are meets and bounds, a rectangular or government survey, or a plat map. Although lot and block numbers and address are helpful for describing property, they're not considered legal descriptions. And any exceptions or reservations, so if you're going to put any restrictions in the deed, they need to be spelled out here as well. So any restrictions in deeds by private parties are called restrictive covenants, and they're to be added, and the type of estate that has restrictions in them is known as fee determinable, defeasible fee, or conditional fee. I got the cross-reference for the page numbers and other chapters where we went over that. And then lastly, they need to be signed just like any other document, but they only need to be signed by the seller. The grantor must sign the deed, and the date is only required if the deed's going to be recorded. Deeds are still valid even without the signature or date. However, if a buyer wants to record the deed, they need to sign it and date it. And their signatures need to be acknowledged to provide evidence that their signatures are genuine and it wasn't a forgery and they're the ones, in fact, that have signed those documents. So it needs to be witnessed by a notary, judge, attorney, or an elected official, a trusted elected official, politician. All right. So this just goes over all the same stuff that I squoze into that one slide there for you. So let's highlight what consideration is on page 364 and what an affidavit is on page 365.
Got it.
Okay. And page 365, we're going to highlight the notes for habendum clause, description of real estate, and exceptions and reservations. Once again, I managed to squeeze the definition for all of them on that one slide for you. So from this chapter, you could probably study just 3 slides. The one about legal descriptions of land, the one about the different types of deeds, and the one about the anatomy of a deed. Those three slides, those custom slides that I made, is probably everything you need to study for chapter 19.
Can you say which ones they are again? Sorry. What were they?
Sure. The legal descriptions of land has all that terminology about surveying.
Yeah.
The types of deeds, the 4 types of deeds used in New Jersey, and the anatomy, and the last one with the anatomy of a deed. Which all this stuff that we're highlighting on multiple pages here is pretty much all that stuff that I squoze onto that one slide.
One that says legal descriptions of lands that has the meets and bounds rectangular survey, that one.
Yeah.
That's the first one. Okay.
Yeah. So let me back it up. So this one right here, legal descriptions of land.
Yeah.
Okay. Where is it? The types of deeds, although, these are the types of deeds, but you also need to know the differences between them. You know, what they do. Full warranty deed is what it sounds like. Bargain and sale deed, like you don't need to know in a full warranty deed what is all of the promises that are being made, you know? I mean, it's good to know, but I don't think you need to know that for example. You just need to know that it's the type of deed that offers the most protection of any deed, which is the most common deed used in New Jersey. The one where the owner says, as long as I've owned it, I've done nothing to encumber it. That's the bargain and sale CAG. Type of deed that's often used in sheriff's auctions and simple sheriff's auctions, where the owner says, I have the legal right to sell the property. It's the bargain and sale deed. And then what a quick claim deed is, you're not even claiming that you have any rights on the property, but it can effectively transfer the ownership. All right. Then you have each one of these slides explaining I should put together a slide explaining the differences between all the deeds. Maybe I could do that. Not right now, but let me make a note about actually doing that. It make things go a lot quicker. Make a slide about the differences. About the differences between all types of deeds. Okay. Did that. Oh, caveat emptor, that's a term you need to know as well, which wasn't on that other slide. This slide, the requirements to convey the property.
Okay.
And we were last here, just to make the notes in the book if you wanted them as well.
Brady, I'm good.
Okay. And the signature of the grantor, the seller. Now there's an interesting note I put down here at the bottom. Requirements to convey the property. To be valid, a deed must be signed by all the sellers, all the grantors named in the deed. A grantor's signature may be signed by an attorney in fact under a power of attorney. That's that written authority that gives somebody the authority to sign documents on your behalf as if you were there standing in the room doing it yourself. So an attorney in fact is the person who you gave that power to sign documents on your behalf. However, if you ever do have somebody else sign a document on your behalf pertaining to the sale of your real estate, in such cases, it's usually necessary for a power of attorney to be recorded in the county where the property is located with the rest of the property documents. Because the power of attorney terminates on the death of the person who gave you that authority, evidence has to be submitted that the grantor was alive at the time the attorney in fact signs a deed. How do you do that? Well, to prove the person was alive at the time an attorney in fact signed a document on their behalf, they would need to appear before a notary public, produce their ID, and the notary will confirm that that person appeared before them on that day, any day after that deed was signed. Because if you appeared before a notary on the any day after the deed was signed, well, then obviously you were alive when the deed was signed, right? So the document could then be added to the public records with the deed and the power of attorney. Otherwise, it could be under question. See how we have to have documents to prove everything?
So you would have to plan to go to a notary just in case you died?
No.
Proof? Is that what
Uh,
you're confused?
no, but that's part of the reason why you do need to, so that if you're having someone else sign your deed because you're going to be on vacation, so you're going to have your best friend or family member or somebody else who's not an owner of the property sign your document on your behalf, sign the deed on your behalf for the closing to occur.
Right.
They need to prove, it needs to be proven that you were alive at the time they signed the document. Because that power of attorney is only good as long as you're alive. You're just being absent and giving that authority to someone else. Because if you're dead, the transfer of ownership takes place through your last will and testament.
Oh, okay. So this isn't planning if somebody dies. This is just if you have to have somebody else sign it and then they want to make sure that it was real, you would have to then go to, okay. I thought this was like planning on for someone's death. Okay.
Yes.
Got it.
Yeah.
All right.
So now somebody can look in the future, going to the future, they could say, hey, who is this person that signed this document? That's not one of the owners. Oh, we see they had a power of attorney. Okay, well then, just to make sure that the power of attorney was valid, we needed also a document showing that you were alive at the time that they signed it. Okay, it's like checking your ID at the closing, But
Okay.
you gave the authority to someone else, and just need to make sure that person still had the authority, and they'll still have that authority as long as you're alive, right? So we just need to make sure you're alive. That's what that's about. And then all those documents get added to the public record. Interesting little factoid there.
Yeah.
So now,
Interesting.
if you're ever purchasing a property and you ever see that, hey, wait a minute, the person who sold that property to the other person, they didn't sign the deed. You may be thinking, well, wait a minute, maybe I shouldn't buy this property because there's a cloud on the title here because there's a problem. This person who's the owner did not sign it. Someone else did. Who is this guy? Oh, we see they recorded a power of attorney. Okay. Okay, so was the owner alive at the time that they signed it? Let me see. Oh, yep, they also added an affidavit stating that they were alive. Yeah. They appeared before a notary and produced their ID. All right, so the acknowledgement now is a declaration made by a person who signs a document before a notary public or authorized public officer. The acknowledgement provides evidence that the signature is genuine. The purpose is to prevent forgery. Although an acknowledgement is not required to make a deed valid, in New Jersey, all deeds, mortgages, and other similar documents must be acknowledged before they can be recorded.
Got it.
Okay? A little bit further down in that page, delivery and acceptance must exist. Before a transfer of title by conveyance can take effect, delivery and acceptance must exist. There must be an actual delivery of the deed by the grantor and either actual or implied acceptance by the grantee. Title set to pass when the deed is actually delivered. So when they have that paper document, I got a piece of paper somewhere. When they got a paper document and they hand it to you, the moment you accept it, ownership's considered transferred. Delivery and acceptance of the deed itself. Now, what did they do in the Middle Ages when people didn't know how to read or write? They were illiterate. How did we transfer the ownership of real estate then? I got a little story for you. You guys remember Schoolhouse Rock? Is anybody here old enough to remember what those PSA public service announcement commercials? They were actually like cartoons for kids, They called it Schoolhouse Rock. They teach them, what is a bill, how the law passes things into law, makes bills, and conjunction junction, what's your function, all kinds of educational stuff like that for kids that they don't do anymore on TV. Because they don't teach civics anymore.
It. Yes, I do.
They're good, those cheesy little cartoon characters, right? Well, close your eyes and picture one of those cheesy little cartoon characters as I read this story for you about how the transfer of ownership took place in the Middle Ages when people didn't know how to read or write. That was only reserved for the wealthy. There was no reason for poor people or slaves to know how to read or write. This is how governments stay in control, how people in the rich and powerful stay in power. They keep everybody dumb. Dumb them down, right? They still do the same crap today. Now, look, read this. So just close your eyes and picture this story. of how we transferred ownership when people didn't know how to read or write. Okay? I'll even do it with a cheesy cartoon character voice. Here we go. In England during the Middle Ages, few people were literate. Transfer of title occurred in the following manner. The seller took the buyer into the field in question and they walked the boundaries. This was known as the beating of the bounds. Then the seller reached down and took up a clod of earth that represented the whole field, and they handed it to the buyer. At the moment that the buyer seized that clod, they became the owner of the land. Today, a document is used instead of a clod of earth, but title still transfers at the moment of delivery and acceptance. And the owner is still said to be seized of the property, to be seized of the land. The word season still denotes ownership and control. So that's how the ownership took place. The owner would walk you around the boundaries of the property, pick up a piece of dirt from the field and dropped it in your hand. You accepted that dirt. You're now seized the land. It's your land. Or it could have been done by war and they just stabbed you and took it, you know. They're seized of the land. It's their land now, you know. Right? That's what happened in the Middle Ages, right?
Got the job done, so
Yeah.
it worked.
All right. So how do we transfer ownership with a corporation? Well, who makes all the decisions in a corporation? The major decisions in a corporation are made by the board of directors. The president and CEO, they need to pass and run by any major decision by the board of directors as well. Anything that could affect their stock shareholders. So generally requires a resolution authorizing the sale secured from the stockholders if all or a substantial portion of the real estate owned by the corporation is being conveyed. Only an authorized officer can sign deeds for real estate on behalf of the corporation. Look, it's even the same case if they want to open a bank account for a corporation. You have to prove that you were authorized by that corporation to be their representative to be able to open a bank account or to close one or to sign deeds to buy or sell real estate, right? So you're going to need some kind of a document that's your letter of resolution that authorizes you to be in that position. So we as real estate agents now, we know somebody says that they're selling a property or want to buy a property on behalf of a corporation or LLC or what have you. Well, how do I know that you're even associated with them? You're going to need to have some sort of a letter of authorization stating that you are the signatory, the authorized signatory on behalf of the corporation. So let's highlight there. Corporation can convey real estate only upon a proper resolution passed by its board of directors. And you may already have that signed because we skipped forward and signed it once before, right? Maybe.
Yeah, it's already highlighted.
Okay. Yeah, you get a question on this on exam, I know. So the only time you got to get authorization from the shareholders is if all the property is getting sold. You know, otherwise it's the board of directors that could authorize the buying or selling of a piece of real estate on behalf of the corporation. Okay. They say here a corporate seal doesn't need to be affixed to those documents unless the acknowledgement mentions that there has to be a corporate seal on there. So then that raised seal gets stamped into the document. All right, that concludes this chapter. Let's do the key terms to review. There are two. One who receives property through a deed. One who
Grantee.
The grantee, that's the buyer or the one that's receiving the property. Remember, words that end in EE, the one who's receiving, the words that end in OR is the one that's giving. So we grant ownership, whether you sell it or give it. So the grantor is the one who gives the ownership, the grantee is the one that receives it. So 9 is A. A deed implying the grantor owns the property and nothing more. They're just saying they got the legal right to sell it.
Organ and sale deed.
2 is B, correct. Actions that actually transfer the title.
Deliver and acceptance.
Delivery and acceptance. 8 is C. A clause in a deed that makes the transfer. It's the heart of the deed.
Granting clause.
The granting clause. 10 is D. A legal promise.
Covenant.
Covenant. 5 is E. A document used to transfer title to a parcel of real estate. It's a document. A deed.
Yeah.
7 is F. So mean sea level at New York Harbor, also local zero elevation point.
Datum.
The datum. 6 is G. Datum, whatever. Deed stating that the grantor has not encumbered the property. What kind of deed says, as long as I've owned the property, I've done nothing to encumber it?
Organ and sale CAG.
Yep, bargain and sale CAG. 3 is H. A declaration to a notary or other official to prevent forgeries.
Acknowledgement.
1 is I. Acknowledgement. And a marker. What do you call the marker that's placed by the U.S. Geological Survey stating elevation?
Benchmark.
The benchmark. 4 is J. Okay. Key terms 2. Spot at which meets and bounds description begins and ends.
Point of beginning.
6 is A. A fixed natural or man-made objects identifying boundaries and meets and bounds descriptions.
Monuments.
5 is B, monuments. One who transfers title by signing a deed.
The grantor.
1 is C. A description sufficient to identify a parcel that is acceptable by a court of law.
A legal description.
It's a legal description. 3 is D. To have and to hold clause that explains ownership that's being transferred.
Then addendum.
The habendum clause. 2 is E. A deed providing the grantee with the most protections.
Warranty deed.
9 is F. System for land description used in Western states. System for land descriptions used in Western states.
Rectangular survey system.
Yes. 8 is G. Rectangular or government survey, it's usually referred to as. A deed relating to the A deed releasing any interest grantor may have without claiming season. They're not even claiming they're the owner of the property or have the right to sell it.
Quick claim.
A quick claim deed. 7 is H. And a description using boundaries and direction.
Meets and bounds.
Meets and bounds. 4 is I. And this concludes chapter 19.